Welcome to another episode of the Half Mile Coffee Podcast. Episode Dos.
Do.
I don't do. Is that French?
Yeah.
There's no French coffee. Anyway, so yeah, welcome back. So again, with our format, we're just going to talk about coffee. Just way too much about coffee, way too in the weeds. And if you'd like to talk about coffee, way down in the weeds of coffee, you're in the right place.
Great.
All right.
So, our first topic is roaster technology, and
Yes.
that is not my expertise. So, Jason, tell me a little bit about the roasting process. What do you do?
Roasting has three phases. So when you get a green coffee, as we call it, it's a seed. So coffee grows in cherries. I don't know why we call them beans. I don't know where that came from. Someday we should figure that out and smack the person. But it's not a bean, it's a seed of a fruit. And so when they extract that seed, they dry it, not to get too far into the processes, but they dry it to about 9 to 12% moisture. So when we get it, this thing contains about 9 to 12% moisture. And that's important because the first part of the roasting process is the drying phase. And the drying phase is essentially using the roaster to heat that coffee up to get rid of all the moisture. So that eventually it turns yellow. And then it moves into the second phase called the Maillard phase, where it goes from yellow to a brownish color. And that phase lasts until the coffee cracks. And that can be anywhere from 375 to 385 degrees, depending on the coffee and what the elevation was. And that cracking is essentially releasing all of the moisture. So you get to this yellowing phase, move into the browning phase or Maillard phase. You hear first crack, and that's where you'll hear the terminology first crack, which is the coffee releases all the moisture. And then past first crack is what we call the development phase. And the development phase is essentially roasting out sugars and organic acids. And so that's where you start to lose acidity, lose sweetness, and gain that caramelization, that smokiness, that roastiness that some come to love with a dark roasted coffee. And so when we talk about roaster technology, what we're talking about is getting after those three phases and how do you approach those three phases. And we've been thinking about this a lot. Because of you guys, we're growing, which is great, and we're roasting a lot more coffee. And so, which means when you roast more coffee, you get a bigger machine, usually because of the amount of labor hours it costs. So if I can, instead of roasting 25 pounds an hour, can roast 50 or 100 pounds an hour, obviously you can see I can produce more coffee per hour from a labor standpoint. So when we're looking at new roasters, there's some really cool technology that's coming out now. So you have two kinds of roasters. You have a drum roaster, which is, just think about kind of like a washing machine or a dryer, or that drum that spins your clothes around. But instead, it's a drum that spins coffee around, and it's heated up in two different ways. So it can be heated up with either direct flame or direct burner, or like ours, which is an infrared burner, which gives you more distribution. And then it's heated, but then there's also airflow that comes into play. And most people think that the airflow is just to push the chaff, which is the skin that comes off the coffee, or the smoke out of the machine. But actually, it's a convective heat. And so 70% of your heat transfer in coffee comes from airflow. And why do I say that? Well, I say that because that's the other type of coffee roaster. So you have a drum roaster, but then you also have these things called air roasters, and they use hot air, and they produce hot air either through gas, or through electric heat with lamps even. Like a popcorn popper is a good example. So anybody who's roasting on a popcorn popper, that is an air roasting technique. And so basically you're applying hot air to that coffee to heat it up over time to move through the drying, Maillard, and development phase. And then you have the hybrid of the two, which is what we're looking at. And so the hybrid of the two is you'll have a drum of some sorts, and then you'll have hot air that heats up the drum that moves the coffee through. It's not just a fluid bed where the air moves the coffee around. It's actually the coffee spinning in a drum, but the heat application is hot air. And so some people would say, well, why do you want both? Because the benefit of the drum roaster is body and mouthfeel, but the benefit of an air roaster is you're less likely to get roast defects, which is burning or tipping, which is when the seed or the coffee bean has too much contact with the drum and it starts to burn. But so with an air roaster, you don't run the risk of roast defects as much, and it produces a cleaner coffee. And quite frankly, we have both. We have drum roasters, straight up drum roasters with two different heat applications, and we have a pure air roaster that will do delicate stuff like reserves and stuff on. So both have their benefits. But the hybrid, which you get with like a Loring roaster or an IMF roaster, is that you get the benefit of a clean air roasting setup but you also get the benefit of the drum and the seeds, the coffee beans hitting the drum so that you can get the body and mouthfeel. And I like to think about this as cooking a steak on a grill versus boiling a steak or doing a sous vide of a steak, if people know what a sous vide is. Essentially, you're putting a steak in a bag and boiling it in water for 4 hours. And it can be really delicious. You're shaking your head.
It's not boiling. It's not boiling.
It's a simplistic, right? It's like you're heating the water up.
Over time.
Yeah, you're heating the water, but you don't have direct heat application touching it. It's more of a conductive. So you have conductive heat, which is when the seed hits the surface of a hot metal drum, and you've got convective heat, which is the hot air, right? So the sous vide would be, this steak sitting in a bag in water that's 180 degrees. Sure, your steak will be 180 degrees and perfect, but it's not as great as if you sear it on a grill after that.
Right, exactly.
To get that Maillard reaction. That's a Maillard reaction, actually, by the way.
For sure.
And so you get that texture and mouthfeel and the benefit of searing a steak after the sous vide. So you're actually, they're talking about a hybrid roaster, it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get the controllability of air and be able to heat the air, but you also get the benefit of the texture of the conductive heat from a drum, so you have the body and the mouthfeel that you want, but also a really delicate, clean roast. And I think as we look towards the future, that's what we're looking at, is more of a hybrid, like a Loring or an IMF. And not to get too deep into the weeds, but the difference between those two, one's American made, which I really like, the Loring.
Yes.
IMF is Italian, and of course, everything made in Italy is superb.
Lovely.
Ferrari, Ducati, everything.
La Marzocco.
So they make awesome machinery there. They're really good at it. So, but the difference between the IMF and the Loring are, the Loring, supposedly you can't, this is all theoretical knowledge for me from reading specs, but you can't adjust the air. With an IMF, you can adjust the air. So the Loring adjusts the air for you based on the temperature. The IMF does not, so you can actually tinker with it. And if you go back to my previous statement, like 70 to 80% of your transfer of heat is air, I would think you would want control of that, or full control over that.
Right. Are you planning on going to Loring later this month?
I think we are. We're going to California.
Yep.
You're going to do some more training.
Yep.
For CVA for cuppers, right?
Yep.
So,
I'm going to try to evolve my queue.
Yeah, which is part of the evolved queue process. So, and then you'll be the only evolved queue in Idaho.
As far as I know.
As far as we know. So that means you are. And so, And then, yeah, so I probably will, if they'll have me, I'd love to go look at the setup because I'm leaning that way probably just because it's American made. And if you have problems with anything, when you're in manufacturing, which is essentially what coffee roasting is,
Yep.
you have problems with anything, you want to be able to pick up the phone or take a 2-hour plane ride to the manufacturer to get answers and help. So
Right.
I might be leaning that way towards a Loring just because it delivers a really quality roast, but it's right here. It's 2 hours away.
Yeah, great.
So,
Yeah, awesome.
all right. So
That was
let's. Anything else on that on roasting? Any questions? Like what questions would just a regular person have about roasting that maybe I didn't cover?
How do you determine the temperature of the air and the temperature of the bean and whether or not you're hitting first crack or not, or, whether you're at the right, you're roasting it, consistently? What are you using for that?
I find that I use the same techniques that aliens use, probes. I probe it. No. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of technology that's come about in the last 20 years that people just don't realize. I mean, there's a place in our town where they still roast with a machine with no computer software or anything.
Yep.
And you can still do it with sensory,
Yeah,
right?
for
That's
sure.
where that first crack, right? So
You can hear
yellowing
it.
phase.
Yeah.
And so those 3 phases are detectable.
Yes.
Based on heat application, right? Some of them are as simple as having a valve that you just turn with your hand.
Yeah,
that
it's like
turns-
turning on the gas on your oven, but without
Yeah.
a thermostat.
Yeah, and it's not rocket science, right? Like at certain phases, you apply a certain amount of heat, and then you decrease the heat the hotter the coffee gets, which can seem counterintuitive. But the hotter your coffee gets, the more that pile of beans tends to conduct heat itself, right? So the only conductive heat going on isn't just the drum, it's also the other coffee in there is transferring heat to other beans, or seeds. And so you want to decrease the heat so the roast doesn't run away from you, so you can still control it. But also, the more heat you apply, the faster, the more likely you are to get those roast defects like burning or charring. So you got to decrease it over time. So as you go in, if you went to a full manual, and I've done this with our roasters, full manual roast, you're putting a percentage into the roast, maybe at 80% gas setting.
Right.
And then say at 80% gas setting, you reach the yellowing phase, which again is detectable through sight, right, without a computer, and maybe you get to that in 6 minutes. Then you're like, man, I'd like to get there slower. So you decrease the heat to 70%, right?
Yes.
So you can actually scientifically develop like a really good roast profile through sight and sound, right? Because then you move into, so say you get the yellowing phase where you want it, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to cut the heat back, maybe
Right.
50%, and then go into the Maillard reaction. And so now you're in the Maillard reaction, and you reach first crack, that audible sound, at 8 minutes. And you're like, okay, so now that's my roast profile, 80% heat. I hit the drying phase. Now the beans are green, go from green to yellow. I decrease it to 40. Now at 40%, I ride that to 8 minutes. I hear first crack. And then maybe I drop it to 5% or 10% heat, and then I ride that out. My development time, that third part of the phase, like maybe I want to let that go for a minute and a half for, say, a medium roast. And then there's this thing on the front called a trier, which is like a little drawer, slide drawer, a round drawer that you pull out, and you can actually look and smell the coffee, put it back in the drum. And you could do all that with sight and sound.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
But we don't really do that anymore. A lot of people don't. Some people do. We have a place in our town that does that.
Right.
But some of us are geekier than that, and we like to put probes in.
Yes.
Right? So we'll have a probe in for the exhaust temperature. We'll have a probe in there for the roast environmental temperature. We can have a probe into the bean pile itself. So as the beans are spinning around in the drum, they're hitting a temperature probe. And so you can see all of these into a software, and you can actually see repeatable graphs. And so that's I think the biggest help that software is is in seeing repeatability and consistency. Because if you're out there and you love a way we roast a coffee, you want that pretty much the same way every time.
Right.
So I think computer software helps with repeatability. I would say I'd love to get to a place where the automation helps. There's a lot of automation in the software now, but because of humidity, barometric pressure, just a different temperature environment outside versus inside, it so affects the roaster that you really just can't automate it past maybe that day. So if I was going to roast in one day 15 batches of the same roast, probably within the third or fourth time I've roasted that, I could probably let the automation take over for that day.
Right.
But there's still some technical skill that's involved in being a roaster at the machine. We're still not in the place where, and I don't know that we'll be in the place where AI can replace it. Our roasting manufacturer, Primo, has a software that'll match your bean temperature curve, which to me is very interesting. But there's still a declining rate of rise issue. And rate of rise is just how many temperatures per second, or how many degrees per second or per 15 seconds is your bean increasing or decreasing over time. So like you don't want, if your temperature is going up 40 degrees a minute, right, from room temperature with the bean to say 200, 300 degrees, if it's going up 40 degrees a minute, you want that to, at first, you want that to eventually decrease. And why is that? It's the same reason why, like if you wanted to have a steak that was similar in the way it was cooked all the way through, you can't achieve that with 800 degrees on a grill, right? It's almost like the sous vide or baking, right? It's like a lower temperature, a lower degree of change in temperature over time achieves an outer and an inner reaction that is usually more consistent and better. And so anyway, all that to say, again, really kind of geeky and getting in the weeds of roasting, but all that to say, if you're just matching the roast profile and doing that through just changing the gas temperature up and down, up and down, up and down, I don't think your rate of rise is going to be in a place where I would be comfortable just letting the machine handle that.
Right.
So I almost think you're always going to need some kind of operator at a machine.
Right. Right now, we're going to talk about cold coffee.
Cold coffee
is such the vibe right now. Everybody wants cold brew. Everybody wants flash brew. Everybody wants iced coffee. We have a really good nitro cold brew that we make for our wholesale partners on tap, which is awesome.
Yeah, Worcester's has it. There's the Cigar Lounge.
Yeah.
I'm told that like when the wives go with the husbands to the Cigar Lounge, that's what they enjoy is the coffee.
Yeah.
They have a coffee while their husband enjoys a cigar. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot about flash brewing.
Yes.
And when people buy our Pepe Reserve, they're flash brewing it. So can you talk a little bit about flash brewing and why is that different than, say, my Aunt Mabel's cold coffee when she'd brew a cup of coffee and stick it in the fridge? Or I think a lot of people are familiar with cold brewing.
I don't think I've met your Aunt Mabel.
Yeah. There's a reason for that. She's crazy. So go ahead.
All right, so
flash brewing.
Flash brewing is a Japanese method of making iced coffee. And essentially, you take your brewer, usually some kind of pour over or a Kalita wave or something like that, and you sort of brew it very strongly because you brew it over ice. And so you end up having sort of an over-extracted brew to an extent that gets properly extracted by melting ice. And so it's kind of a cool method, and it flash cools your coffee, and so it brings out a lot of the sweetness of your coffee, and it makes it very mild. It takes away a lot of the bitterness and acidity, kind of not quite to the extent that cold brewing coffee does, and then you get an instant iced coffee. And so you cool it down with a flash brew, and then you pour it over ice again. So then you end up with your iced coffee.
So when I'm brewing it, I know you do a lot of this. I don't think
love
I've
it.
ever flash brewed. Do you have to, is there an equation, or do you have to account for the ice as far as it melting as part of your weight?
Exactly. And that's why your ratio is a little bit more, you have a higher ratio of coffee to water in the brew because you're going to melt the ice and your ice becomes part of your finished product.
Okay, so like walk me through this. So if I have, so say our Ethos brewer, I see you brewing it on our Ethos brewer.
I do,
right?
yeah.
So you put ice in there.
Yep.
In the vessel.
Yes.
That you're going to catch the coffee in.
And I weigh that.
You weigh that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so if say you're going to do a regular pour over ratio, like 20 grams of coffee to 360 grams of water, how does that factor in? Do some math in public for me right now.
I don't know the ratios. I haven't worked out the ratios, but I like to make a really tall cold ice flash brew. So I put about 200 grams of ice in the brewer, in the bottom of the brewer, and I do about 30 grams of coffee, and I grind it medium fine for the Kalita. So whatever your brew method is, you want to stick to that grind. So if you're doing a Chemex, stick to the Chemex grind. If you're doing a pour over, do the pour over grind. Or if you're doing a Kalita, do the Kalita grind. So whatever is appropriate. And then you want to, and I do 200 grams of water over that. So, and then I probably do I definitely do one bloom pour, and then that's like double. So 60 grams of water. And then I'll do the rest of the in one or two more pours.
So it sounds like you're doing about a third more coffee.
Maybe.
I
guess the ending ratio, I don't know what the actual, because some of your water gets trapped in the coffee.
Yeah.
So I would say I end up with 450 milliliters of coffee, right, to 30 grams of
and that's still about 16
grinds.
To 1. That's about 16 to 1. Then.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I tend to just enjoy that. When I'm at home and I'm not like prepping for a recipe or a podcast, I kind of go by how I like to taste it. You know, like
in the business we call that winging it.
I don't. Right, I wing it. I didn't bring my my little gadget to test the extraction.
No, I think that's fine. That's the beauty of home brewing is you get to mess around with it and play, kind of experiment.
Yeah, I didn't bring the VST home.
Yeah.
To test it.
Yeah.
My pipettes.
What is that? People have no idea what you're talking about.
So it's a machine that you drop coffee onto, and it will tell you how much dissolved solids are in the coffee. So you get your TDS of your coffee, and the SCA would say the golden ratio should be like 22%.
So what's a TDS? What's a total dissolved solid? Like, explain that.
Yeah, so coffee is obviously like a hard seed that we're grinding up. And so when we put the water over it, we're extracting some of the solids out of that coffee. And you can see that when you're done brewing your coffee, you have a lot of coffee left in your filter. So that most of it is not going into your cup. And so what is the percentage of coffee to water in your cup is basically what you're measuring.
Yeah, so and the different consistency from which you grind your coffee is going to produce a different yield from that hot water coming into contact with the surface of the coffee, right? And so this is where time comes into play.
Right, how much time is your water in contact with your coffee?
Yeah, and this is the different brew methods, right?
Right.
And is one of the things that was kind of cool to understand is if you just go to your Mr. Coffee and throw, a bunch of coffee in there, your water is only going to get one pass at that coffee, and water can get full of dissolved solids. So that water that's mixing with your filter with your coffee is only going to trap a certain amount of total dissolved solids, and those total dissolved solids is basically your coffee water. that you're
Yes.
drinking.
Yep.
And so this is the beauty of like a Chemex or a pour over, is you get the bloom, which releases the CO2, so you have less bitterness, right?
Yep.
But then you get 2 or 3 more passes of water.
Clean water,
So,
yeah.
right, clean water that don't have dissolved solids in it. So in theory, you're getting a better extraction from those coffee grounds
Right.
with the water, because the water isn't just full and sitting in there and can't get any more. You're constantly putting new saturated, great term, and you're getting new water through there.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of cool, and it's the same, like the principle with espresso, right? So espresso is ground really fine.
Yes.
There's nothing special about espresso coffee. It's a method, a brewing method, really.
Yeah.
And so you're grinding the coffee fine like sand, and you're putting a minimum amount of water through it. But why you're getting such a thick extraction is because of the pressure from which that coffee is run through, or the water is run through the coffee.
Right.
And that's, so different brewing methods are going to achieve a different TDS, or how many solids are in your water, or how much coffee is in your water.
Exactly. Right. And then that is just a number. What really matters is what you think of it when you drink it.
Right.
It's like, how does it taste to you? Because some people like coffees different ways. And I think for iced coffee and flash brew, I definitely want a lighter coffee, a lighter extraction. So to have it a little bit more watery is refreshing, I think.
It's more tea-like. It's more like iced tea in the summer.
Right. And so I think that's why the flash brew probably has a little bit higher water ratio.
And I think that's why flash brewing is probably a great method for Pepe.
So Pepe Thai-Oxy is different than Pepe Sai-Oxy. Sai-Oxy is a Sidra, and it's a different coffee. It's a different varietal, and so it behaves differently and it tastes different. The Thai-Oxy is a Typica Mejorado, which is not the same as a Typica. It is its own specific coffee that was pretty much created in Ecuador by, a certain company back a long time ago that Pepe Gijon has been cultivating, and he's been creating this oxidator process and this wave method, and so what he comes out, the result of that is this really delicate, interesting coffee. So when you brew it, if you brew it really hot, it has this really, people call it like SpaghettiOs or tomato soup or very umami flavor. Mm-hmm. But when you extract it with slightly lower temperature, maybe like 195 or below, maybe 190 even, and then even more so if you flash brew it, it ends up being super sweet and like candy apple and just really incredibly different. And so I think that is the beauty of coffee, is that it can be so interesting.
Yeah,
so.
And we always talk about coffee being made 3 times, right? At the farm.
Yes.
In the roastery when we roast it.
Right.
And then at home when you brew it, you actually are the last part of making that coffee. And I think the Thai-Oxy is a brilliant example of how different brewing methods and different temperatures create a very different experience. And it just shows the complexity of that varietal, of the processes that Pepe's put into it and all the work. And so it's really a cool example of how a home brewer can really change everything about that coffee.
Right. And it gives you a chance to take something and experiment with it a little bit. Like take it home, you have 4 ounces or 8 ounces to play with, and then you can, with that amount of coffee, you can brew it a lot of different ways and kind of be able to play with it to see how you like it. Do you prefer like some of the more umami flavors, or do you can you get that sweetness out of it? So it's sort of a challenging coffee.
Yeah. What about cold brew? So we talked about flash brewing this summer. Flash brewing is pretty popular, but I mean the predominant probably technique or way people are brewing or drinking coffee cold in the summer is cold brewing.
Yes.
And so what's the difference, if there's people that are listening that don't know, in the brewing method with cold brew versus flash brew, which is really just brewing coffee over ice? So the regular brewing method versus a cold brewing method, and why does it matter? Why not just have cold coffee like Aunt Mabel?
Yeah, so I'm not knocking cold coffee. I think that's fine. And
Or Aunt Mabel.
When we
You don't knock
right.
Aunt Mabel.
And when we have extra leftover coffee, often we throw it in the fridge, and the kids drink it for sure.
I like it.
I think anything that's prepared in advance,
If it's easy, our teenagers will do it. All right.
Yeah. So cold brew is a method of extracting coffee without heat. And when you do that, you avoid extracting a lot of the bitter compounds that make the coffee bitter. And it's also a very hands-off approach to coffee. You can soak coffee for 24 hours and then strain it, and you have either a concentrate, depending on how much water you use, you can have a concentrate or you can have ready to drink cold brew. And it's really delicious, and it lasts for about, I would say, 2 weeks in your fridge. So it's convenient. You could probably make coffee for yourself for the entire week in 24 hours. And, it saves you a ton of money, and it saves you a ton of time. It's just a waiting game, really. And there's lots of different brewing methods, a lot of different ways to do it. For us, we have created a kit that is essentially you just plop this coffee in a pitcher for 24 hours and then pull it out and you're done. There's no mess at all.
It's the best cold brew you ever had in your life.
So it's a Nicaraguan it presents as a dark roast, but it's really a medium roast. And so it ends up being like super chocolatey, super rich, super, just a perfect cold brew black, but also is really, really good for milk drinks. I just made one this morning with a little almond milk that I had made today. So it was really, really good.
It's just crazy. Like, I come home, I made almond milk. Like,
I did.
I didn't know you could milk them.
I rounded them all up, milked them all.
Milked them. I like that cold brew because if you close your eyes, you put a little half and half in it. You close your eyes, you swear you're drinking chocolate milk. It is just ridiculously chocolatey, and just by and large, the cold brew method, if you like putting creamer in your coffee, there's no better canvas for any kind of drink, especially in the summer. I think, for my taste, people can go too far with the whipped cream and like all this stuff in it.
I remember one day I brought you a
cold foam. I didn't say cold foam. Cold foam was sent down from heaven. I don't even know who invented cold foam, but I tip my hat to you, sir. Or ma'am. Cold foam is magical. Yeah, I was working in the garage. You brought me something with cold foam.
I was like, ooh, try this.
I think that was the first time I've ever had cold foam. It was ridiculous.
It was fun. Because I had purchased a little frother, like a little, like the $5 Walmart like milk spinny thing.
Yeah, money well spent.
Yeah.
So
that was good.
Yeah, cold brew's a great option in the summer. And I think that's good. Yeah. That's good information about brewing in general. Really.
Yeah, I think cold brew, and so I think that the biggest tip I have for cold brew is if you buy whole bean coffee and you want to grind it at home, is to set your grinder to the coarsest setting that you can, and because you don't want to over extract it. And then my ratio is 5-to-1. I know, like, I was just watching Morgan Eckroth, and hers is 8-to-1 for her concentrate. Mine's 5-to-1. And if you want to do a ready to drink, it would be more than that.
Yeah. Well, and people sell extracts too, and this is essentially the extract they're selling.
Yeah, it's just how a cold brew concentrate.
Yeah, just how concentrated is it? And people do martini drinks with it, like espresso martinis now, or alcohol drinks with espresso. So sometimes when you're getting a cold espresso or espresso martini, what you're really getting is an extract from a cold brew, which I would argue, if I was going to serve iced lattes in a cafe, I think cold brew concentrate is a great way to do it. Like ounce for ounce, a cold brew concentrate, I think is better than pulling an espresso shot.
Okay.
Was that controversial?
I
Wow. Wow. I just looked like the way you looked at me. It's like, wow, are you going to
kind
say
of-
that? Are you going to say that
yeah.
in public? Yes, I just did.
My facial expressions can be judgy, but it doesn't mean that I'm judgy.
You weren't judging that.
I don't know.
Okay. No, no opinion on
I
that.
don't know. I don't know if that's the case.
Okay. All right. Well, for all you
I think
mobile
it's-
carters out there, I think it's a good option. Right?
I think it's your opinion.
I think for mobile
and that's
carters, it's a
okay.
good option. I don't think people would take exception to an iced latte that was a cold brew extract, because I just think it's really good.
Yeah, it is really good for sure. It's definitely a quality product.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about, we have big, kind of exciting news
Oh,
on the
yeah.
horizon. So we've started a Idaho Coffee Institute. So we've started a school of sorts.
Yeah, we're starting it.
Nicole, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so Idaho Coffee Institute is going to be, or is becoming, a just specialty coffee association school where you can get your certifications for sensory. And we will also offer roasting in the future, but we're starting with sensory. And we will have classes online and in person. And we think that Moscow, Idaho in particular is such a fantastic little destination for anybody who wants to take a coffee class, because there's a lot of cool things to do here. So if you're coming for a coffee class, then this is just a cute little town to be in.
Oh, especially like in the fall and stuff when
Yeah.
the school's in full swing, or even summer when it's quiet. But yeah, we really noticed that obviously we are really invested in the Specialty Coffee Association.
Right.
And I think just particularly me, I'm drawn to objective standards of things. And so with teaching and the way you do things, and we noticed coming here that there is no specialty coffee schools that are really teaching a lot of classes, so a lot of you would think we're near Portland, we're 6 hours from Portland, 5.5 hours from Seattle.
Yeah.
We're really close to Montana, which has got a cool coffee culture.
Right.
Even Boise, right, is like a thriving little town with a cool coffee culture.
Right.
You would think that there would be more people teaching SCA or Specialty Coffee Association classes here,
Right.
which are basically the gold standard of coffee classes, whether it's sensory, roasting, barista.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, green coffee, sustainability, water, tech.
yeah,
There's
but
so many things that they offer.
yeah, but we just feel like there's not enough being done, so we're going to plant the flag and do what we need to do to start generating some classes in this area, and hopeful that people from Seattle, Portland will come over. Like you said, it's a great little town to do it.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
love to teach.
And what Specialty Coffee Association offers, I think, is a really robust curriculum in coffee. I
sure.
don't think that we would be as knowledgeable or have been able to have the experience that we have without the Specialty Coffee Association. I think when we were new and just learning about coffee, I think we had a really small view of what coffee was and what it could be. And being part of the Specialty Coffee Association has really broadened our perspective of what is involved in specialty coffee. It's not just, coffee is coffee in your cup and it all tastes the same and you just, make it better with sugar and cream. It's an entire industry, and I think it also really focuses on the people involved in coffee and the farmers and how they take care of the land and the plants. And it's just so it's such a universal experience, the coffee experience, and I think it's very rich and very deep.
Yeah, and these are tangible, and they're tangible skills. All right, so I think that's it for
our
this
podcast.
month. For this month, so hopefully you learned something, and hopefully it's some value to you. So share it with your friends, and as always, we appreciate your time, you listening. Appreciate your. For those of you buying our coffee, we really appreciate you supporting us.
Definitely, and if you like this podcast, subscribe to it so that we can make sure you know about it next time we.
Oh, and we're on YouTube.
We're on
So
YouTube.
I've always wanted to say this: smash the like.
Smash the like.
Smash the like button. All right, thanks everybody.